The year was 1892, and the town of Fall River, Massachusetts, was gripped by horror. Andrew and Abby Borden, a wealthy and prominent couple, were found brutally murdered in their own home. Andrew's face had been nearly split in two by a hatchet, while Abby lay in a pool of her own blood upstairs, her skull crushed beyond recognition. The murders were shocking not only for their brutality but also because they occurred in broad daylight, in a house with only one other person present, their daughter, Lizzie Borden. Lizzie claimed to have found her father's body and called for help, but her demeanor was calm, too calm. Suspicion quickly fell upon her, and she was arrested and tried for the murders. The trial captivated the nation, with Lizzie maintaining her innocence throughout. Despite the damning evidence, including the purchase of a small axe and a dress burned in the fireplace, Lizzie was acquitted. The verdict only deepened the mystery, and the house on 2nd Street was forever marked by the shadow of those unsolved murders. Decades later, in the fall of 1974, a group of ghost hunters from Boston decided to visit the infamous Borden house. The group, led by Marcus and Emily Graves, had gained a reputation for their investigations into haunted locations across New England. With them were their two colleagues, Claire and David, both seasoned paranormal investigators. They had heard the stories of the house, how visitors claimed to feel icy hands on their shoulders, hear the faint sound of a woman weeping, or see the ghostly figure of an old man sitting in a chair. Intrigued and eager to document any paranormal activity, they made the trip to Fall River. The house had been preserved as it was on that fateful day in 1892, and stepping inside felt like stepping back in time. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and something else, something metallic, like blood. The group set up their equipment, infrared cameras, EVP recorders, and motion sensors. As they began their investigation, the house was eerily quiet, as though it was holding its breath, waiting. Hours passed with little more than the occasional creak of the old house. Emily, who had a sharp intuition for these things, felt uneasy. "Something's off," she whispered to Marcus. "It's too quiet." Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped, and a cold draft blew through the house. The group huddled together in the parlor, where Andrew Borden had been found dead. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp, casting long shadows on the walls. Claire, who was sitting closest to the spot where Andrew had died, suddenly gasped. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. The others listened intently, but heard nothing. Claire's eyes widened as she pointed toward the chair where Andrew had been killed. "There. I heard footsteps, and whispering." Marcus turned on the EVP recorder and asked, "Is there anyone here with us? If you can hear me, please give us a sign." The recorder crackled, and then, through the static, a voice, faint but distinct, replied, "She did it." Everyone froze. The voice was deep, almost guttural, and full of anger. Claire's hands began to tremble as she clutched the recorder. "That wasn't a normal EVP," she whispered. "It sounded like..." "Andrew Borden," Marcus finished, his voice barely above a whisper. Just then, the room grew colder still, and the lamp flickered. The shadows on the walls seemed to stretch and writhe, as if they were alive. David pointed the infrared camera toward the spot where Abby Borden had been found upstairs. The screen showed a cold, dark shape, standing in the corner of the room. "There's something there," he said, his voice shaking. It's looking at us." Emily felt a sudden pressure on her chest, as though an invisible force was pushing down on her. She gasped for breath, her eyes wide with terror. "We need to leave," she choked out. "Now." But before they could move, the house erupted in chaos. The lamp shattered, plunging the room into darkness. The sound of footsteps echoed through the halls, growing louder and faster, as if someone was running toward them. A loud crash from upstairs made everyone jump, followed by the unmistakable sound of a woman screaming in agony, a scream that reverberated through the walls and into their very bones. Marcus grabbed Emily's hand, pulling her toward the door. "We're getting out of here," he shouted. But as they reached the doorway, it slammed shut with a force that sent splinters flying. The group was trapped. Suddenly, Claire let out a scream of her own. She was staring at the wall, where a shadowy figure had appeared. It was a woman, her face twisted in pain, her eyes hollow and dark. The figure raised her arm, and in her hand was a hatchet, dripping with blood. The group backed away, terrified, as the figure began to move toward them, her steps slow and deliberate. "Lizzie?" Emily whispered, but the figure did not respond. Instead, it raised the hatchet higher, its eyes fixed on them with a look of pure hatred. In a desperate bid to escape, David slammed his shoulder against the door, breaking it open. The group rushed out of the house, the sounds of their own pounding hearts nearly drowning out the ghostly wails that followed them. They didn't stop running until they were far from the Borden house, their breaths ragged, their faces pale. Back in Boston, when they reviewed the footage, they found nothing but static. The EVP recordings were filled with garbled voices, none of which they could clearly decipher. But one thing was certain, something dark and angry still lingered in that house, something that wanted to keep its secrets hidden. The Borden house remains a place of mystery and terror, where the spirits of the past still roam, and where those who dare to investigate might find more than they bargained for. To this day, visitors to the house report strange occurrences, cold spots, disembodied voices, and the faint scent of blood that never seems to fade. The legend of Lizzie Borden lives on, her presence felt in every creak of the floorboards and every whisper in the dark.